I said we look at governance, and joining me for this particular conversation is Kaba Mawa from Loop, who is a Loop moderator. Ka, good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon to you too.
All right, great. And also joining us is Subilo Malema. She mentioned I shouldn't think she's related to Julius Malema. She's not. Subilo, good afternoon and welcome.
Afternoon, and thank you for having us.
All right, great. So, for starters, we need to get to understand what the African Charter for Democracy, Elections and Governance is all about. What is this?
Okay, so the African Charter for Democracy, Elections and Governance, and Good Governance actually, is a document that was signed by AU members, African Union members. So this document stipulates what good governance is and what the principles of that good governance are, what the lining points are, what do you measure, what's the measuring scale of good governance. There's the human rights aspect, there's the social accountability aspect, there's the legislative aspect, and of course there's various other aspects that are in line with good governance. So it was assented to by states in 2007. This was done in order to promote liberal democracy and human rights in Africa, and it is a document that is binding all AU members.
All right, very interesting. I believe Zambia is, has subscribed to the African Union. But let's try to find out, is Zambia, or rather this chapter, also applicable to our country?
Yes, it is applicable to our country. Zambia signed and ratified the ACDE Charter in 2010, but still it hasn't domesticated it down to its national laws. So the aim of this project is to spearhead, as the Zambian Governance Foundation, we are trying to spearhead with the support from the Democracy Works Foundation, which is looking at popularizing it. So the charter is also calling and encouraging young people to play into civic spaces using a digital platform that we are calling Loop. So we are encouraging young people to be able to give feedback, to be able to give us their views on what they feel in their civic spaces. We believe wherever they are, when they have civic spaces, these are spaces where they are free enough to talk about issues to do with governance and democracy. So we do have a platform called Loop that we really want to utilize in terms of popularizing this actual charters.
All right, very interesting. I'll not drag you into politics, but at some point in this country, we saw a number of youths that teamed up to protest on some what they had termed some issues that then the government, but it wasn't as easy to access the permission to air out these views. I want to find out how the conversations has been and how the involvement of the young people and the desire to be a part of this is.
So the charters basically support liberal democracy, where when Zambia ratified, it means everybody has the right to speak and the right to give their opinions about what they feel with issues to do with democracy and governance. So we believe that everyone has a right to say what they feel and to give in their opinions and to also state what they feel isn't going right or what they feel is going right. However, so the platform that we have in place helps us to have people speak about what they want to speak, and they can speak anonymously if they don't consent to us giving out their names. So people are free to air out their views and their concerns concerning issues to do with democracy and governance.
Let's look at the African Charter for Democracy, Election and Good Governance, like she emphasized. What could be some highlight in this document?
Okay, so the SCDEG Charter has 11 chapters, and of these 11 chapters has provisions for 53 articles. So And all these speak to good governance and democratic elections in the African continent. Like, for instance, Chapter 3 speaks on the principles that all AU members should practice. Under this chapter, we see instances on respect to human rights, democratic processes, holding regular elections, transparency, and fairness at the total condemnation and rejection of unconstitutional changes of government. So Chapter 8 has 4 articles, and they speak on sanctions to states that have unconstitutional change of government. These include a post or a coup d'etat. So this is in an instance, for instance, where we take in account Niger, where there was a coup d'etat. So then there are sanctions towards these nations that then choose that line of governance.
All right, very interesting. But this is obviously what the young people and everyone else being part of this conversation should dive into. You've mentioned of a coup d'etat in Niger. Burkina Faso has. For the past 20 years, we've seen an increase of coup d'etats, especially in East Africa. The most recent one in Niger, they've ousted President Bazoum. The conversation is ECOWAS is part of the African Union, and whoever does not, go in line with what this charter says, there could be sanctions. But this is also breeding now seemingly fights. Kenya's president says, well, ECOWAS should act on Niger because we believe in democracy and people should decide. And the people themselves in Niger, they are saying and rallying behind the military that have taken up the coup. How quick is the African Union in enacting what is stipulated in the charter?
So for it to act, the nations that are signed onto the charter, that have ratified this charter, must meet a consensus. They must meet and make a quorum to then decide on what the next course of action is. If they do meet and they do not come up with an accurate number of member states to then make this decision, it then brings this decision-making process at a stale, because then it is hanging in the balance. So I think the issue that we would be having really is there's countries that are for the coup and there's countries that do not support the coup. So then how many of those countries are able to make up a full quorum to allow this committee sit down and decide on the fate of Niger and Burkina Faso and all these other countries that are participating in coups? So I feel it's a slippery slope, really.
Well, I believe it is, yes, but trying to get to look at what the increase has been and the conversation, many young people, other people have complaints and raised concern to say, well, these charters are just documents. They've done less of the actions. How are the conversation being driven for us to be action-oriented?
Okay, so in respect to that, I feel this is what we're trying to do as ZGF and
Yes.
DWF. What we're trying to do is we're trying to popularize the importance of domestication of these laws. They have been ratified, but they have not been contextualized to allow the Zambian laws speak to what these particular articles are saying. So in that case, we then feel like there's nothing that the documents are doing because they are not being married with the current laws that we have in Zambia. For instance, we have a constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, but then we still have bylaws that feed into that constitution, which is the same thing. We have the African Charter for good democracy, good governance and elections, but then our laws as constitutions, our bylaws, our own country laws, are not feeding into that charter to then make it applicable and to make it work with the current articles and current constitutions and laws that we have as a country.
All right, they say technology is a new pen and paper, and you had mentioned an aspect of digital platform that is enabling young people to participate in civic spaces. Well, I just hope not they are called keyboard merchants. You say the young people are very, very good at sitting back, relaxing, and only typing and not acting. Tell me about it. How are these platforms, the digital platforms, also helping in these conversations?
Okay, so let me just explain how Loop works. So Loop is a digital platform that anyone can use at their own comfort. So you need to have a cell phone for you to be able to access the platform. It doesn't need to be a smartphone to say. So it can be any type of phone that you can use to access the platform. So we do have a toll-free number, which is 4343. Then you don't need to restrict yourself on issues that you can bring on the platform or share on the platform. We also do use the platform as a referral path system. So the young people are able to share their views using the platform by either sending an SMS message or sending an IVRR, which is like a voice note message. Then they can also use WhatsApp, they can also use Facebook Messenger. Then we also have Loop on a website. They can also use that to communicate whatever they feel like. So in terms of managing the platform, we do have moderators that are able to receive these communications that come from young people. And then we are also able to tag people when a concern comes in, people that we feel can respond to issues that are affecting the young people in the different communities. So we have moderators that also ensure that once feedback comes in, before we publish it on the platform, of course, if the person consents, the platform is able to state whether the feedback is sensitive or it's not. So before we publish it, any person interacting with the platform, it's very user-friendly, has to indicate or give consent whether they can give us their name, their location. If they don't feel like, we still have access to that information that they'll share with us. So we've been receiving different views from young people on how they feel certain programs should move, how they feel certain things should be done. So once we have that opportunity, we do tag people that we have contact so that they are able to see what young people are saying about specific programs and what they feel can be done best in their communities. Then we are also currently using the same platform as an M&E tool, where we are encouraging different organizations to log onto the platform so that they are able to filter data that is relating to their line of work. So it's easy to capture a certain topic or a certain line of information that you want on the platform, depending on what the young people are sending in.
All right, very interesting. Maybe just for somebody who's watching, young or old, how do they just go about the process? You've mentioned it works either way for analog phones or the smartphones now. How does somebody get hold of you or to process? How is the entire process? Maybe you can just highlight on how the process is.
So I'll give an example of SMSs and the IVRR. Maybe for better understanding, I'll just say voice notes so that people can understand what I'm talking about. So you don't need to have talk time. So Loop is available on all the 3 networks that we have in the country. So all you need to have is a phone and network. So if you want to send in your feedback using an SMS, you can just type Loop to 4343. Then you receive replies that will tell you the next step. So it will either ask you for your name, for your location. So if you're not free with giving us all that information, you can skip and just go straight to giving us feedback that you want to give us, concerns. We also use the platform for whistleblowing. People have also used it for whistleblowing. So the platform is very user-friendly. It will give you instructions on what next to do. So for the voice note, you just call 4343 on all the 3 networks. Then it will give you instructions. So it will tell you to press 1. Then, just to mention, the platform is available in Nyanja, Tonga, Lozi, and English. So it will ask you to state which language you are comfortable with. Then once you state the language that you are comfortable with, the platform is able to give you feedback with a language that you understand, and you're able to give feedback in a language that you are comfortable with to express yourself. So it's very simple to use. It will give you instructions on what next to do. Then you don't need to have airtime for you to be able to access the platform.
All right, great. Let me get to you, Subila. You had mentioned on the chapter, the 11th chapter, Article 53 of this particular ACDEG charter, and it speaks on good governance and democracy. There's been conversations and narratives to say Africa has had its democracy defined not by Africans, but but not by Africans. How is the conversation and the narrative that Loop is driving to seeing that we define our own democracy, and that in turn will be able to make us rule ourselves in a proper way? If you look at the coups that we mentioned, it could be that other former colonies are involved in it. But how are we going to define our own democracy for the continent of Africa? Are these conversations, what levels are these conversations at?
Okay. So for the Loop platform, in the beginning of the conversation, you did mention of some youths that took to the streets and were not very, I don't know, for lack of better terms, they were not allowed to go out.
Yes, they were not allowed, yeah.
So what we are doing firstly is bridging the digital divide. So in the past, for you to make a statement for the government to get your attention, you had to go out in the streets. Now what we're trying to do is get people to do that, but through a digital media, which is Talk to Loop. So basically what happens is when someone uses the Loop platform and sends in this information to say, let's say it's information concerning CDF or community development. What we then do as Loop is once we receive this notification, we get in touch with someone at CDF who's responsible for that particular type of feedback, that particular type of query, that particular type of statement or opinion. And once that person is contacted and we alert them to say we have received this sort of information and the person would like some feedback on this, as opposed to getting up and going to the offices. Most of us don't even know where the CDF offices are. Most of us don't even know who to speak to. But with Loop, we're making that easy for you in the sense that you can speak to these people, you can air your views, you can speak your opinion in the comfort of your home. So what we are basically doing is bringing your power to you. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically what we're trying to do is to ensure that every young person is participating in their civic, as a civic leader. But in the civic spaces we're present, mostly we talk about representation. I believe in Zambia we just have, 5 MPs who are youths, I think, or thereabouts.
Well, yeah. Very few numbers.
Very few. And you see, because of that, we always cry representation. They don't open doors, they don't invite us. But the thing is, we're not going to stop. We've stopped waiting for them to invite us. I feel it's time we create the platform for ourselves. It's time we start airing out our views. And with Loop, I feel it's making it easy in the sense that all the information that we would need can easily just be filtered through once it's given, and people can use that to inform their protests, or not really protests, but petitions. They can write a petition and attach certain information to say, okay, according to the Loop platform, between the times of, let's say, January to June, we received feedback concerning CDF according to so many people were asking about this, so many people wanted to see this happen. You see, it can be disaggregated data. So because of that, I feel it's a beautiful platform that people should start utilizing, and they should take advantage of the opportunity.
All right. Let me get to you, Mawa, on how you had mentioned and capitalizing as a young people on these, platforms. But obviously, with the way trend has been made, if you have a smartphone, you stand a better chance of having full information and being enlightened more. How are you also targeting or covering up, across the country, the young people? I believe we have young people in urban areas, those that can even access these conversations on TV or on social media. And we also have young people in the rural. Are they neglected? How are we also embedding these areas so that no one is left behind?
So other than that, we are working with different civil society organizations. We have a few that have signed up with us. We are capacity building them to be able to talk about Loop in their programming. So as the Zambian Governance Foundation, we have integrated Loop in all our programming, in all the communities where we are implementing different initiatives. So once the officers are in the field, they are able to talk about Loop. They do share with them on how they can use Loop, and they do emphasize that you can use Loop for different issues. Then we also encourage people that have cell phones to allow others to give feedback. You can give your feedback using another person's phone, because once the feedback goes to the moderator doesn't even get your phone number. So only one person has access to the phone number, and we only request to have the phone number if it's an emergency and we need to follow up, because we also do receive cases to do with gender-based violence on the platform. So only if there's need to do a follow-up, then we do quickly request for the phone number for the particular person that has sent in feedback, so that we do a follow-up. So we are working with different organizations around the country that are implementing different initiatives. So we do support them with creating awareness about the Loop platform, and we do capacity build them to integrate Loop in their programming. And we do tell them to emphasize that Loop can be used for different things, and you can not only in tune it with what we are talking about right now, but you can use it for a lot of things. We have people also sending in feedback to use Loop as a platform to do their research, where somebody sends in a feedback asking what is REP. So we are able to tag people from different CSOs that are working on issues to do with abuse or rape, so that they help us in giving that particular person the information that they need, or if they are researching on any topic, we do tag. Then we do have people that have an understanding of different issues. We also give feedback on the platform. So far, I can safely say that we are trying as much as we can to work with the different CSOs. It would be nice to see all the CSOs coming on board, so that we capacity build them to use Loop, and we tell them about Loop, so that they are able to integrate it in their day-to-day programming, because it's free. We don't expect them to pay us any service fee for the platform.
All right, very interesting. Subilo, I must make mention to say I didn't realize we have an all-female guest list. That's how accommodative, and if there's quality, yes. Let me also just pick out your brains, you, the moderators from Loop, and how maybe the participation from the female counterparts with regards to the civic duties. The narrative has not been very good. That can have a spillover effect if we see representation in terms of female in parliament. We only have 15%, which is so little in terms of civic participation and duties. How's the level of also the women and the females in terms of coming to the fore and be a part of the governance and democratic issues?
Okay, so the participation of women in governance issues has been rather low because of various stumbling blocks. We can say the access to information and the access to certain spaces. I believe as a country, as a continent, we need to be intentional when creating the civic spaces. We need to be intentional to be accommodative and to ensure that we are including everyone who needs to be included. And my worry is not only with the women folk that are not participating, but even the people that are disabled. I feel I don't know of any member of parliament who's living with disabilities.
There's no one.
Yes, physical disabilities. Of course,
Yeah.
we all have mental disabilities.
Well,
But
it depends on a certain degree.
yes, to some degree.
Yeah.
But to see a person who has physical disabilities, I don't think there's anyone. So when we talk about being inclusive, we're looking at it from that perspective. We should be intentional, we should be inclusive, and we should not write off people based off what we feel they cannot perform. Because there's this this narrative that goes around that women are too emotional, they cannot be good leaders. But then I feel that's writing off someone based off something that is not
Before they are
credible.
tried, you write them off.
Yes, that's being very prejudiced. So we need to be intentional to create spaces where we are inclusive.
Now, based on what she said, I don't know if who can be able to pick it up, either you, Subilo, or Mao. I asked you on how you're also invading the rural spaces. Now she brings in a very important aspect where there are people that are living with, disabilities. Others physically or mentally, but especially those maybe that are physically. Either they can't type, they can't write anything, or they can't see anything, but they also need to be part of the governance, and they are citizens. They've got the right. Are there also deliberate measures or policies that Loop can use to loop them in?
I can answer that. Yes, we are partnering with organizations that focus on specifically people living with disabilities.
Right.
We have a grassroots organization, so we're focusing mainly on grassroots organization because we understand that it's a community-led project. It's people from the community that will be feeding back. Therefore, whatever sort of innovation, whatever sort of awareness should start from the grassroots. So we are engaging organizations like Zafod, trying to get them into allowing us into their spaces, including us into their spaces. And we've been in touch with a grassroots organization called Yadiz in Chawama, where there's people with physical disabilities that are working to be part of the system. So as we go forward, as we roll out countrywide, we'll be reaching out to various number of participants, various number of partners to just be included in the talks around civic inclusion, because even the name of the project is Digital Inclusion of Youths in Civic Spaces in Zambia. So we're taking the digital approach of inclusion. So we are leaving no one behind. You did say that for people that maybe cannot, that are blind, they can call in. I believe feature phones have Braille on them, so they can type.
Yeah.
They can type 4343 and then listen. For people that cannot speak, they can type, and they can have someone help them by typing. Okay, so there's all these assistances. We're trying to bridge the gap. Of course, it just becomes difficult for the people that cannot speak and cannot hear, because then cannot speak, cannot hear, and cannot see, because then that becomes a barrier. But we're still working around. I'm sure by the time before we know it, there will be some form of AI that is going to be helping us.
It's here.
Yes.
Just after this show, it's here. Trust me.
Yes. So I believe that we're making strides in the right direction. But of course, inclusion is a daily process. It's an active and conscious decision to always be inclusive. To even as you implement a project, you need to keep in mind that there's people that have a different ability from you, so you must also make sure that the space is inclusive. So I think, I don't know, have I answered your question?
So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
maybe just to add to what Subilo is saying, we are also very open-minded to getting new ideas from the people that we are working with. So we are able to make certain adjustments or add features to the platform. So we are also learning in as much as we are implementing the project, because we believe that things get to diversify and we have a lot of dynamics. So it would be very good if we have a lot of organizations on board and if people embrace the Loop platform, because we'll be able to understand their needs from the feedback that we'll get from them. They can even give us feedback on how best they feel we can serve them using the platform.
All right, very interesting. But also to get the level of engagement or the involvement with regards to the youths, do we have maybe statistics that are guiding us to where we are going? We cannot look people blindly, but do we have some sort of statistics, maybe with major stakeholders that we do have, and in terms of the feedback that we are getting, so that we can clearly picture what our direction looks like? In
terms of statistics, it's an ever-evolving system.
Right.
Okay, so Loop is an agile project, so we develop as we go based off the preferences of the particular communities. Maybe we just neglected to mention, but Loop is not only available in Zambia. So we are available globally. Right now we are in Somalia, we are in Indonesia, we are in the Philippines, we are in Poland and Ukraine. So plus Zambia, so that makes 6 countries. So we're responding for Ukraine through Poland. So that in itself gives you the diversity of how open our system is and how diverse we have spread out. So for instance, Zambia is a development context, okay? Then we have Somalia, that is a humanitarian context. We have various contexts. We have context that there's a disaster context. So there's various contexts to it. So because of that, we then understand that for every country, there's a different context to it. So we are trying to tailor this Loop platform for Zambia, for the Zambian context,
Great.
which is development, and we are now having more people interested in the civic space. So as we are building on that, we will then have a better understanding on what direction we would be taking. So right now, on statistics-wise, it's very vague, because firstly, we're fresh out of rolling out Loop in Zambia. We haven't really touched base much. So to say we have a particular type of number, but maybe we can just touch on saying Zambians are not very open with giving open criticism. They are not very for the idea of speaking up for themselves. That is what we are understanding from what we can see.
Very interesting feedback.
Yes.
Yes.
So they are not very for the idea of speaking up, but then we've noticed that if they are giving feedback and it's sensitive, they would rather stay anonymous. So that's also something we're picking up. They're not very open to stating their ages, their gender. They wouldn't want to say that. If it's sensitive, they would rather they just whistle blow and be on their way. They don't want you to get in touch with them to find out more. They don't want you to get in touch with them so that the person that they've alleged can be investigated. They're not for the idea. So maybe we need to build a culture in Zambia firstly for us to want to speak up for ourselves. I know we're coming from a regime that was rather difficult. We're coming from difficult times, and maybe we just have some PTSD and we're trying to process through ourselves. But from what we are picking, Zambians are rather, for lack of better terms, scared to give feedback on especially civic-related issues, election-related issues,
Governance,
political-related issues. They're very, very close to that. And I feel it would take a lot of encouragement, a lot of raising of awareness to have Zambians in a space where they are comfortable with naming and shaming with no fear or favor. Because it's different from other contexts. Like when we look at the Philippines, when we look at Indonesia, when we look at Somalia, these people are speaking up for themselves. These people are openly criticizing their superiors. These people are openly criticizing organizations that are being abusive. There's a lot of things going on. But for Zambia, when you go to the open platform, you only see thank you so-and-so, thank you so-and-so organization, thank you for coming to our town. But then when it comes to the hard-hitting issues like corruption, we're talking GBV, we're talking people worried about the state of the economy, it always comes in through the sensitive platform. So it's rather withheld from the public. So maybe we need to gain some comfort in that area.
Well, that's a very interesting, feedback from Loop. But I think to get to summarize, I would love to have your word and caution, basically on what the mandate, the charter, and what the drive and the vision of Loop is all about. To the young people, the other stakeholders, could be the government, they also need to make sure that the young people are involved, because you cannot substitute experience. Young people have been referred to people with less experience when it comes to them sitting on decision-making tables. But what could be your caution to the young people there in relation to how they can get involved and how much they can get involved?
I think for me, we do need to popularize the African Charter.
Right.
Because people need to understand what's in it and how they can benefit from it. then I also want us to create an environment, because you realize that civic issues in our country are believed to be a form of cadarism of some sort. It's linked to that. But then we need people to understand that we need to be free, because these are issues that are concerning us. These are our today-to-day issues. Everything is attached to leadership. And that we need to also aspire to take part in some of these positions. And for us to be there, we need to understand what are those issues that are affecting us the most. So people need to realize that if we just sit back and say, this is not my platform, this is not something that I can indulge in or interact with, then we'll still have young people not participating in civic spaces. So we need to have young people spearheading. We are shifting the power. Shifting the power means the community themselves being able to bring out different initiatives, taking the lead in doing different initiatives. We don't need to wait for political leaders to do things in our communities.
Right.
So we need to stand up, we need to start speaking. Young people can have dialogue meetings in their own communities. It needs to take one person who understands civic issues to have dialogue meetings in the communities, to talk about them. We need to create an awareness, because, you know, even these projects are funded. They do come to an end. But we need to inculcate sustainability.
Right.
So we need Loop to be sustainable. You don't need to wait for a looper to talk about Loop in your community to be able to use Loop. So we need people to take up the initiative. You've heard about Loop. We're talking about Loop. Anybody who's listening to us can tell others to also use Loop. You can use Loop for anything. You don't need to restrict yourself.
All right, great. Mawa and Subile, it's been a pleasure to have had you for a sumptuous lunchtime today. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for having us.
All right, great. We'll be looking at good governance. And I've been speaking to Mawa Kaba and Subilo Malema.